Hello and welcome. I'm Chakshu Roy and you're watching Laws in the Making. Today on the show we are discussing the Central Education Institution's Reservation and Teachers Cadre Ordinance 2019. To discuss the ordinance, I have on the show with me Mr. Desh Ratan Nigam, Senior Counsel, Supreme Court of India, and Ms. Geeta Bhatt, former member, Academic Council, University of Delhi. The Central Education Institution's Reservation and Teachers Cadre Ordinance lays down guidelines for reservation of teaching positions in central education institutions for applicants belonging to the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, and socially backward classes. The ordinance mandates that while observing reservation of teaching positions, the university will be taken as one unit. This provision in the ordinance reverses position under the judgment given by the Allahabad High Court, which prescribed that each department in the university had to be taken as one unit.
The ordinance has been promulgated with a history of significant debate on the question of increasing representation of teachers from the SC, ST and OBC communities. In 2006, the UGC listed out guidelines for implementing a reservation policy in the recruitment of teachers in central universities. These guidelines were to use a roster system that took the university as one unit. The rationale given for this choice was that smaller units reduce the number of posts that can be reserved.
If you recollect, before this ordinance, for a long time, there was a complete ban on appointments because it was not clear which roster to follow, whether reservation will be followed or not. How will the roster be made? Is it 100 point, is it 200 point, or it is department wise or institution wise? Therefore, I think the ordinance is a good step in the right direction because it clears many suspenses and doubts, and therefore it paves the way for the appointment of young teachers. It's not only the SC, ST, OBC teachers, it's for all teachers because there was no clarity in which roster to be followed or how the reservation is to be implemented. So all central universities and institutions had completely stopped or were forced to stop appointments or recruitments. Therefore, the ordinance is very good because it opens the possibilities of new recruitments and appointments of young teachers in different universities and institutions.
In 2017, the Allahabad High Court delivered its judgment in a case where the petitioners asked the court to question the process of using university as a unit while implementing reservation for teaching positions. The courts observed that subject-wise departments should be taken as a unit instead of the university as a whole. The rationale given behind this judgment was that taking university as a unit could result in some departments have more reserved candidates over others. The court observed this to be disproportionate in the implementation of the reservation policy.
Actually, it has a backdrop. After the decision of Allahabad High Court, the 13-point roster system came into existence. But as a neutral person, when I see or other professors, other stakeholders of the system saw an agitation started because faculty members were being impacted on this. So government decided that there should be some system where proper justification can be done, and I think it is a very the pattern is very much in justifying manner, and definitely ordinance will bring a positive beneficiary will be benefited in long way, and the impact will go on a long way.
In March 2018, the UGC amended its guidelines to incorporate the ruling of Allahabad High Court. In April 2018, the Ministry of Human Resource and Development filed a special leave petition with the Supreme Court against the 2017 order of the Allahabad High Court. However, this review petition was rejected by the Supreme Court in March 2019. Following this timeline, the Central Education Institution's Reservation and Teachers Cadre Ordinance was promulgated.
The Teachers' Reservation Ordinance was promulgated before the general elections, and now that the first session of Lok Sabha is starting, there will be a bill tabled in the House to replace the ordinance. Dr. Bhatt, I wanted to start the program with you and ask you as to how does reservation in teaching position happen in central universities, and what are central universities?
Chakshuji, you see, I mean, first of all, the universities that they are existing are under, since we know we have a, federal structure in our country as per our constitution, there are certain certain institutions, educational institutions, which are being governed by the central government, and there are certain which are being governed by the state government. So the central institutions as well as the state institutions, since they both can, devise their own methodology and terms and conditions for employment. However, there is a general rule which is going to be followed, and especially in terms of when reservation has to be implemented in the university system or across any other government employability or autonomous bodies, since most of the universities, in central government universities, they are autonomous structures. Now, we all know that as per our constitution, our constitution provides for those who have been socially and educationally backward for historical or otherwise reasons, and hence right from the beginning, after we got independence, there was reservation in terms of for scheduled castes as well as for scheduled tribes. Now, but it was only after the Mandal Commission, it was implemented. After that, we saw that the other backward classes also got introduced into the reservation system across the government positions as well as across the university positions. So it is important to note that earlier to OBC Commission, we had this 13-point roster system only, where the reservation policy which was implemented, which was based on 13 points. Now that basically means is that there are 13 positions which have got which are meant either for the unreserved or for the SC or for the ST, and for the now for the OBC. Earlier it was not there, and that used to be repeated. So, like for example, first 3 positions would be unreserved, then the 4th position would be for OBC, and then again 2 unreserved, then for SC, and this pattern 13th post is for the scheduled tribe, and then the whole cycle repeats itself.
Okay, so it's a sequential system.
Right.
The first posts have to be filled,
right,
and every time an X number of posts are filled, a Y number of posts open up for,
right, and then this whole sequence gets repeated. Now in the 200-point system which had come after the OBC Commission, it was there this repetition was taking place not in terms of 13 points but in terms of 200 point. And another important aspect of it was that this was to be implemented where a college or a university was taken as a single unit, in comparison to the 13-point where every department in the college was taken as a single unit.
Okay, so in the 200-point system, the university was a unit?
Yes.
And in the 13-point system, a department within a university was a unit?
Yes.
Okay, we'll come back to that because that's an essential detail.
Yeah, and also I would just like to add in that is that because of this reason, what happened is that once, as you have just told in the report that because of the High Court intervention, it was again told that the UGC should come out with a 13-point roster. It was what happened is now because of if we know that across the country now there is a choice-based credit system scheme which is being used while teaching, because of which the number of faculties which are to be employed in every department, their number is more or less fixed. Otherwise, earlier used to happen, for example, English department had a very large number of posts, or Hindi department, and maybe a science physics department or some other department would have a lesser number of posts. So now more or less across it is the same number of posts which are going to exist.
Okay, so
right.
same number of posts that exist, out of which a reservation has to be carved out,
right,
either under the 13-point system or the 200-point system. So we'll come to that. Mr. Nigam, clearly, in the package that was running, there's a judicial background to the coming of this, to the promulgation of this ordinance, and now to the coming of the bill. Can you very quickly walk us through as to what has happened in the courts, which has led to the ordinance coming into play?
Yeah, this ordinance comes when there is an urgency and the Parliament is not in session. The Allahabad High Court rejected 200-point system and implemented 13-point system, as rightly pointed out by my co-panelist. However, the government did not agree to it and challenged it in the Supreme Court. And Supreme Court rejected the SLP, a special leave petition. However, the government went in for the review. The review was also rejected. And therefore, in this background, the government, because of the constitutional power it had to promulgate an ordinance in case of there are urgent situations, promulgated this ordinance in 2019 and just before the elections, as you rightly pointed out. And therefore, this ordinance came into being. And since the elections are over now, and therefore a new government has come, and therefore a new bill on the basis of the ordinance has been put in place and it has been approved, which will be presented in the coming Lok Sabha. And that is where the entire process has come. And this applies to central educational institutes, which are aided and maintained by the central government, and have been created by an act of parliament. There could be deemed university or institutes of national importance.
Okay. Mr. Nigam, so, when I was reading the Allahabad High Court judgment, it talked about the fact as to there was an advertisement for vacancies to be filled by the Banaras Hindu University. The Banaras Hindu University is a central education institution. And I think two individuals who were to gain employment in the university then challenged the opening of those positions. So what was the rationale that the Allahabad High Court gave when it gave its judgment?
See, it went on the merit and quality. However, there the government of India did not agree. And secondly, because of that judgment, what was happening, as rightly pointed out, that the number of seats coming to the reserve sections were getting reduced actually. And because the department being a very smaller unit was taken into consideration. Now the entire university would be taken as a unit and the recruitment would be done as per, and probably that would open up roughly by this ordinance, by this bill, about 7,000 vacancies for SC, ST and socially and economically backward. What is important here is the government of India brought in 10% EWS quota.
That was through the constitutional
amendment, which is also opening the posts will also go to 10% economically weaker sections of the society.
The ordinance provides for reservation of posts in direct recruitment of teachers out of the sanctioned strength in central educational institutions. For the purpose of such reservation, a central educational institution will be regarded as one unit.
The reason given for the decision to reverse back to a system of considering a university as a unit was that subject-wise department consideration might reduce reservation of teaching posts. In departments with single posts, reservation will not be applicable for the teaching posts. This could reduce the number of SC, ST and OBC teachers in Central Education University.
Yeah, this ordinance talks about Institute of Excellence and also minority institutions. These universities which have minority provision, institutions which have minority provisions, as well as Institute of Excellence and research institutions, they will not be coming under this ambit. A few I can name which is given in the ordinance. One is Bhabha Atomic Research Center, Indira Gandhi Center for Atomic Research, Raja Ramanna Center for Advanced Technology. There are 7-8 others, Institute of Excellence and also minority institutions. It will not come due to their specific nature, special nature, where reservation doesn't matter a lot. These are under this ambit where faculty members will not be benefited.
The guidelines of implementing reservation policy for teaching posts given in the ordinance will apply to central education institutions. These include universities set up by Acts of Parliament, institutions deemed to be a university, institutions of national importance, and institutions receiving aid from the central government.
Government has issued an ordinance concerning the appointment of faculty members in universities and institutions of higher learning. Well, this is in accordance with the spirit of the Constitution of India. One expects that more and more candidates from reserved categories would be found qualified, and the situation of acute shortage of faculty members in these institutions would at least be looked after positively. I still have the feeling that we may not have enough candidates who would really qualify. What to do then? I would suggest that we establish some 5 to 10 institutions throughout the country.
The ordinance excludes certain institutions from under its purview. These include certain institutions of excellence, research institutions, and institutions of national and strategic importance, which have been specified in the schedule of the ordinance. It also excludes minority education institutions.
A bill to replace the ordinance has been approved by the Cabinet and will be taken up in the next coming session of Parliament. Dr. Bhatt, I wanted to ask you, can you now break us down what does this new scheme of reservation under the ordinance really mean? So if you have to take the example of a university and take some numbers, if you can walk us down as to what does a reservation mean for the SC, ST and for the OBCs?
Right. You know, like in the 13-point roster, which is related to implementation to a particular department in a college or a university, what happens is that if, for example, I was just telling you before that now since it is the choice-based credit system, which is as per the curriculum is being implemented, so the number of teaching positions in all the departments will be more or less the same, and which is largely about 10 to 11 in a college, at least I can tell you. So in university it may vary, but the fact remains is that, for example, in a college, if the first 3 positions are that of unreserved and the 4th position is of OBC, then the next 2 positions are again unreserved, then there is a SC position, then there is a OBC position, again 2 unreserved position, 1 OBC and ST's 13th position. Now in the most badly affected because of this were the ST position, because that was the 13th position. Now if in a department as a unit, if you are taking and there are only 10 positions over there, so that reservation for that particular community is not going to ever come.
So what you're saying is, in a 13-point system, if there were only 10 vacancies in the department,
yes,
the ST would never get an opportunity to be at that position.
Yes, and that was the that was an issue which was because of which there was a lot of agitation also, and there were a lot of teachers who were very agitated. And in fact, the government of India, when it went with the review petition, it actually gave a number that in 21 central universities, if based on 200-point roster, if there were 2,663 positions, which were reduced to 1,241 positions if the 13-point roster was implemented. This was the information which was given by Government of India in its plea, to restore back the 200-point roster. Now, for example, one example we can take of the Indira Gandhi Tribal University, National Tribal University, which is located in Amarkantak, and it is the only tribal university in the country. When they took out an advertisement after the Supreme Court judgment had come, there were 51 positions, vacancies that they had advertised, out of which there was only 1 position. It was quite ironical that a university which was a tribal university had 1 OBC position only in it, and rest all of them were the UR positions. And so was the case in other, for example, Banaras Hindu University also came out, Central University Haryana came out with their advertisement. Every advertisement we could see this data which the Government of India had quoted, that the number of positions going down. So that was one important reason because of which the Government of India thought that it is important to actually come out with an ordinance and later with a bill to go ahead with the reservation.
So, Mr. Gam, this is interesting. So the numbers, as Dr. Bhatt is pointing out, is that if you use the 13-point system, there is a certain reduction in the number of seats vis-a-vis if you use the 200-point system. Right? What was the rationale that was given by the Allahabad High Court for going with the 13-point system? And what was the rationale by the Supreme Court for agreeing, with the Allahabad High Court judgment?
See, Supreme Court simply rejected it. It did not give it. It upheld the Allahabad High Court, and therefore, as I said, the emphasis mistakenly was on the merit, thinking that merit should be paramount. But it ignored the fact that the adequate representation to SC, ST, and socially and economically backward classes was not being given adequate representation, which is actually a mandate of the Constitution. That is where this, this ordinance comes into the picture. The moment it takes the university and the college as one unit, it increases the possibility, as explained, for representation of these communities. However, one has to keep in mind that the quality need not be compromised. The applicability is only to the central institutes, central education institutes, including universities and deemed universities. And this new quota system that has come is only to enforce the constitutional mandate, because they were not getting the adequate representation out there. And this increases the chance of the adequate representation. And at the same time, if you look at the new concept that has come before the elections, was the 10% economically weaker section quota. That it takes care of, and the representation is not only confined to SC, ST and OBCs, but also to the economically backward sections of the society. So it's a very comprehensive thing, and one of the aims and objectives of this bill is to enhance the teaching standards in the university and to recruit the appropriate talent from every section of the society.
Dr. Bhatt, so Mr. Nigam is talking about talent, he's talking about merit. So what is the merit-based argument that was looked at by the, which was used by the Allahabad High Court?
You see, actually, just like Desh Ratanji just mentioned, that at that time the court was looking at it from the perspective of taking the merit of the candidate into consideration. But we do have to understand that that in our country, when the constitution very much it tells about that how those who have been socially backward and have been educationally backward, there is a provision that we need to actually see their representation also in the universities, whether it is in the classrooms or whether in the teaching faculty. So keeping that in mind, as this bill also includes the 10% economically weaker section quota also is taken care of in this bill, which is coming in the in the parliament session. So it is actually a comprehensive bill where it is looking after the interest of those communities which have been historically backward, socially backward, as well as those who have been weaker because of their economic reasons and not because of social or educational.
Okay, Dr. Bhatt, I also want to ask you one more question. What happens when reservation comes in, either in the 13-point system or under the 200-point system? What happens to the the career graph of a reader or an assistant professor or a junior professor? What happens? So does all of these individuals have an opportunity to grow up in the ranks, or does it impact their progress in their careers?
No, each one is, once you are into the system as a teacher or as an assistant professor who has joined, after that it is basically the service conditions which govern them, and the service conditions govern each of the teacher irrespective of the reservation or the seat from which they have come. Okay. And for example, right now the 7th Pay Commission has been implemented by the Government of India, and the service conditions which have come in that, they are the ones which are going to govern all the central universities faculties who are going to be appointed over there. So based on that, there is a certain there is an API system which is there, and based on that there are certain for the initial career graph where you move from, like for example, once you have 6 years of service, then 8 years of service, and so on and so forth, you are internally evaluated within your institution, and once you go for the post of associate professor, for the post of professor, because now the post of professor has also been introduced in colleges by the Government of India through this 7th Pay Commission. So for that now you need an API, but for other the API is restricted to the basic academic responsibilities as well as teaching responsibilities which have been given to you while you are doing your university job.
I now have to take your final comments. Mr. Nigam, can you in your final comments talk about the impact of this ordinance on to the teaching community?
See, the fact remains that this opens up the recruitment to a large number of seats, which is about 7,000, and a lot of vacancies because of this confusion that was prevailing were not being filled, and therefore you will see adequate amount of recruitment taking place and adequate representation to everybody as provided in the bill. And secondly, we have come to a stage where the earlier reservation system has brought number of merit based people among these reserve sections also, and therefore you have a large talent pool from where you can fill these vacancies, and I am sure this will also enhance the teaching standard apart from giving adequate representation.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Nigam. That's all the time that we have on the show for this discussion. It's now time for us to end the show. You can watch our shows on the RSTV page of YouTube. We will be back with a new issue and a new episode. Keep watching Rajya Sabha TV.